All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, Bettina. How are you?
Hi, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing really good. I'm doing really great today. I've had a nice sleep and got my workout in before the show, and so I feel vivacious. It's always, I always find I always knew this my whole life. Whenever sometimes when you're sedentary, a body at rest wants to stay at rest, and then when you get yourself to get up and go, and maybe you put through a little exertion, or you go do the thing that you built up to be such a big thing in your head, and then afterwards you just feel great, and you feel great, and those residual effects last through the day. And I always find no matter how many times we all know this because we've all experienced this. No matter how many times we do it, we still find ourselves in that same emotional state just before we take action.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that threshold thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's always worse right before you step over the threshold. A fear of love, of uh, something adventurous, of a workout, of a diet, of it doesn't matter. It's the worst, the most intense point of any like fear or trepidation or whatever it is always the most intense at that very moment before you step over the threshold. Um, so yeah, it's like, I've said before, my whole life is because my whole life is, I think, there's been a lot of fear in my life. I mean, um, I think my perspective of life has always been through a filter of fear. And so for me, stepping over that threshold every day, sometimes many, many times, has been a really big thing for me. And I think, yeah, it goes for anything, um, including, the things you need to do that you don't want to do. Like I got my income tax stuff all together and sent it off to the accountant today. And I'm like you with your exercise. I feel so good about it. It's only February.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
early.
Yeah. So, and every year been getting a little earlier and a little earlier. And this time I was actually ready and I was just waiting for a T4 um, and then it was like slap that in there and send it off. So yeah, I think we just need to step over that threshold. I think that's probably the most important thing we can ever find the courage to do is step over the threshold because the rest is usually pretty amazing when we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this week, and after another day, I had done my workout, and I felt like like you get these quotes and stuff, and about these motivational quotes and all this kind of stuff, and they can certainly be useful, and they can certainly alter the way that you think about something, and they're certainly useful. But then I was thinking sometimes about how you're like, what do they know and stuff like that. And then I was thinking, I was feeling the high, I was feeling great, feeling proud of myself, feeling all the good feelings that come with it. I mean, there's a myriad of emotions and just energy that you feel good afterwards. And I was thinking about quoting myself because that guy knows, that the post workout Eric giving some quote about how good this feels, and so I can look at that in the future, looking back on me. Maybe I could take my own advice, but it is funny. When I first came across the idea of state management, it was something that Tony Robbins was really big on, and it was one of the first things I got introduced to. And if you want to change your life, you change, figure out ways to consciously change your state. And it's so true because no matter, because even still, on those days, I had a day on it was Wednesday. We can get into later in the show, but I was just feeling really down on Wednesday. And I talk on the show too about like the biorhythms we go through, and what to do in those periods, whether it's a short trough or a long trough where we don't feel good, and we just feel sad, or not at our vivacious best. Um, but no matter what, even if I were to quote myself and look back on it in the future, um, it the state that you're in just completely takes over the way that you think. We have this thought generating tool in our head that doesn't stop, and the thoughts that come are generally commiserate with the state that we're in. and finding reliable tools and reliable ways to change our state. Um, it, I found for me is the most powerful way to get myself moving in the direction I ultimately want to go. You know, my highest version of myself wants to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think thoughts are everything. It's really interesting because, I don't know if you know the guy who does Notes from the Universe. What's his name? Dooley. Forget his first name. Sorry. He always says thoughts become actions. Pick the good ones or something. But we don't necessarily have control per se over the thoughts that we seem to find more intriguing and interesting and that we want to really latch on to. We don't have control of the thoughts. Millions of thoughts go through our minds on a regular basis. We have no idea what half of them are because we don't latch on to half of them. I'm sure there's a good proportion of them that say, you're amazing, you're perfect, you're, an amazing divine creation, whatever it is. But we don't latch on to those because our belief system says, oh, you got to be humble and you got to be, it's not really true. And you don't want people to think you're too big-headed or egotistical or whatever it is. It's not like you're going around saying, telling everybody I am the bomb. It's just believing in yourself that you're perfectly okay and that you really can't do anything wrong when you're in that place of knowing you're okay. So sometimes you latch on to some pretty negative thoughts, but it's not the thought itself that has the meaning. It's the judgment of them that gives them meaning. And so, like you say, you start feeling a bit down, and then all the thoughts that you're latching onto, of course, are supportive of how you feel in that moment. And I know I've talked before about that. I had that little diagram of the very center. Around the outside, you've got your thoughts, your beliefs, your actions, and your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, and then in the very middle, you have your beliefs. And all three of those other things come from what you're believing in any given moment. And what you're believing in that particular moment is maybe life sucks. I feel like crap, life sucks, blah, blah, blah. That's the belief. And maybe the belief is, some days you're not going to feel good. Some days you're going to be unhappy, whatever it is. Or this particular thing is not meant to make me feel happy. It's meant to make me feel bad. It doesn't matter what the belief is. It starts setting off, the thoughts that we grab onto, the feelings that arise from those, from the grabbing of the thought, and then the actions that we take are based on that whole system. There's nothing wrong with that. Like we do go through, it's like a wave. We're up and down with it. It changes on a regular basis. Feelings, emotions are always flowing through us. Thoughts are always passing by. We're always grabbing onto thoughts. We're always judging them. We're always feeling things because of it. And sometimes we do dumb things, but is it wrong? Actions are just actions. It's me who puts the meaning on the actions. If you do something, it's only an action. It's me that puts the meaning on the actions. It's me that puts the meaning on the thoughts in my head. It's me that puts the meaning on what I'm feeling. Really, when you think about it, and I have thought about this a lot, if you're feeling sad, is it really negative, or is it just another emotion that's flowing through you? It's different than feeling love. It's different than feeling happy. But who's to say it's good or bad? It's just another emotion. And I think we get into trouble when we start labeling and categorizing and putting meaning on, I feel sad right now. Even to give it a name. I know Eckhart Tolle has spoken about, you give something a name and then suddenly there's a judgment about it. You look at a tree and you say that's a tree, and then there's expectations attached to it. It should have leaves, it should be green, it should be, you know what I mean? Like you label something with a name, and then suddenly there are past expectations put on that particular item based on what you've learned in the past, what your belief system is, the whole thing. But if I were just to say, I'm feeling right now, it's really not good or bad. It's not until we say, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling sad. Oh, that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
So, I often wonder about just sort of taking those labels away from it and just say, I'm feeling something right now, feeling something, it's different than what I was feeling yesterday, or it's different than I was feeling 5 minutes ago, or whatever. But I'm just feeling something right now, and I'm just going to let myself go through that process
Yeah.
and not worry about good or bad, right or wrong, up or down, that duality of it. It's probably a little deep, but
No, that's so true. And I want to explore that a little bit because um, for me, when I was first introduced to that, I had a really strong anchor that was true, but I didn't know it until I had started to read about that and exactly what you were just sharing about how, is feeling sad bad? Is it something that we shouldn't be feeling, or the resistance towards that? Um, and of course, I'm not advocating or arguing that we should feel sad or angry predominantly. Of course, that would have negative effects to have that be the case. But um, momentarily, at times, being authentic and loving yourself while you're in that state. I know that I've had some conversations with people. This is kind of a big thing when people feel stuck and they don't want to release the idea that something is bad, or release, as you say, the judgment on the thought. But for me, for whatever reason, it was easy because I remembered. This is one of the things that was easy for me because I remembered when I was about 10 years old, and I had always wicked temper when I was a child and into my adolescence, and it's something that I struggled with in my middle of adolescence and getting out of it. And it was something that was a real challenge for me to really master. But I remember having this conversation with my dad, and he pointed out to me, says, "Yeah, but you're always angry." And I said, "But I love being angry." And it was one of those. It was a real, genuine, honest response from like a 10-year-old. And I remember that moment as one of those 50 moments you remember from being a kid. And I knew in that it's me putting the judgment on it, that caused me all the trouble and caused me all the resistance. And you, like we always say, you got to feel it to heal it. And going into it, when you feel these things, I'm having this feeling come up, and I'm just going to need some time to explore it. And like I said earlier, like on Wednesday, I had a couple of things fall through and some plans that I was excited about. Nothing big, but it just kind of set me off into like a negative mood, and I felt sorrowful, and I felt a little a little bit of a little misery, and my energy was really low, and I knew enough that day to just sit with it. I knew, and I just had like some of these anchors where it's like, you got to feel it to heal it, and if I were to resist it, if I were to go distract myself with video games, or go out with a friend, or to find something that I didn't have to think about it, but I committed to myself because I know it's true. I know that if I feel it to heal it, if I sit with it and I just figure out what it is, um, and allow it to come through me. It's not even like I have to like fix it. It's just I have to allow it to be. And if I don't push against it, if I just feel it, if I just honor it, perhaps you take something out of your schedule that day, because it's the best way for self-care. Because maybe you come out of it, but you don't actually feel it. It'll just come back again later. And knowing ways where you can gradually come out of that state, for me, it's like, go circulate. That's always in my head. Go circulate, go create. Yeah, this happened. It's frustrating. It's disappointing. You don't feel good about it, but go start moving. Start interacting with the outside world. Start creating circumstances that you want. And as soon as I get into the first steps of creativity again, as soon as I start moving in the direction of the things that I really want, it naturally begins to fade. And the new feelings, the upward movement begins to come in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the whole idea of really being with it and just sitting with it, like as if you're sitting with a sick friend. You can't, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can fix. Just sitting with them and holding their hand, or, just creating that space for them to be in that place where they're in healing mode or whatever, makes a huge difference. And I think we forget to do that for ourselves. And I know, sometimes well-meaning friends will say, oh, you're in a bad mood. Oh, well, come and do this and take your mind off it, and you'll feel better. You will momentarily, because you're in distraction. But like you said, it will come back again if you haven't dealt with it, if you haven't had the chance to sit with it and be with it and give it its space and its time and its moment. That's really the best way to heal it, the best way to move on. And then, like you say, you give it its time, and then you get up and you start creating again. You start engaging in the world again. You go from within to without and back again many, many times in a day, in a week, in a month, and all for different reasons and all at different times. And it's that lovely balance that you find, where you can be engaging in the world, but also then coming from within and going within and finding that peaceful sweet spot that allows you to be so engaging in the world in a very loving and powerful way, really.
Yeah. I love that analogy. I haven't heard you, or I don't remember, I haven't heard you say that before, about sitting with a sick friend. That's really beautiful. And it's a perfect analogy for when, something has made you sad, or something has made you angry, and just go, like, if you can think about like a split self in a way, and you go and you sit with your sick friend. And I love what you said, that sometimes there's nothing you can do. There's nothing to do except for hold their hand and acknowledge their sadness, acknowledge their anger, acknowledge their frustration, acknowledge the lull. That's beautiful. That's really self-compassionate. I mean, that's compassionate, but when you do it with yourself, that's really self-compassionate, and that's really beautiful. And I also like how you say, you have that well-intentioned friend who tries to, like, hey, come here, let's go bowling, let's go do something fun, and you try to distract your friend away from it, and it is well-intentioned. But yeah, don't do that to a friend, and don't do that to yourself. If you're able to be that self-compassionate using that example to yourself, you'll be able to extend that compassion to the people in your life, and boy, won't that make you valuable and loved.
Yeah, it's like, my world is ending and you want to go bowling?
Yeah, or worse, come drinking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a good one. I find it really interesting, because I was, Peter and I were out today, and I had to get a sympathy card, and I kept picking up these sympathy cards and reading them, and Peter and I would read them and we'd look at each other and go, it just was, they seemed too trite. They seemed too, it's that, oh, well, you can live on the memories, and who wants to hear that when their world has just been ripped apart? It just didn't seem, it seemed a bit almost patronizing. Um,
Yeah.
certainly not what I want to convey to someone who's just lost a loved one. I think I just want them to know that I'm holding them in this very loving space while they go through it, and that until they come out on the other end. It's like, oh, I remember when my first husband died, and Stephen's friends from school all sent little cards to him, and I mean, these kids were like 14 years old, and we sat there reading these notes, and quite a few of them made us chuckle because it was like, oh, I'm so sorry about you lost your dad, but I lost my dog once, and I really know how you feel. And they probably did, right? But it was just it just made us chuckle to think that they were sort of comparing and I know there's a lot of people, don't get me wrong, animal lovers. I know there's a lot of people that their animals are just as much family as them. And then another one was, well, at least you got first string in the orchestra. It's like, well, don't feel bad. You got first string in orchestra. They were doing their very best. They were doing their very best, but it just was, they were being honest and authentic, but it just made us chuckle because, what do you say to someone who's lost a loved one? What could you possibly say to make it better? You can't. And it's that same idea. You just want to sit and hold their hand and as they go through it. And when you can't do that because you live far away, you have to do the best you can, so you send a card, and hopefully it's not too patronizing or too trite or too commercial. And that it conveys what you want to say. And I guess my point here is, when someone's going through something, or when you're going through something, you want to hold the space for them while they go through it and find their own way through it, because there's nothing you can do to help them get through it other than holding that sacred loving space in which they can be whatever they need to be in that moment to get through it. And if you are going through something like that and you don't have anybody who will hold that space for you, then gosh, do it for yourself. It's not impossible to do it for yourself, to really hold a sacred space for yourself where you can be fully in it and let it wash over you, and just get it out of you so that you can move on and you can remove yet one more block to the love that is who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we can be our own best friend. We should be. And where's a sympathy card that just says, "This fucking sucks"?
I know, right? There aren't any. We finally found one. We kept saying less words the better. We'll write what we want. I would prefer a card. I'm standing there and I'm going, I could work for these people and write them something better. But yeah, it's, I will write my own thing, and it will probably be something along the lines of just holding you in a space of love while you go through this, because I can't promise it's going to get better. I know people who grieve for years and years and years. Is there anything wrong with it? No, they're doing it at their own speed.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do to change that for them. I mean, you could turn around and go, like, get over it already. But if they're not ready to get over it, they're not ready to get over it. So all you can do is just hold that little space for them as they go through it, and be compassionate and understand that while you may not have taken that long to get over it, other people do. We're all different.
Yeah.
It's patience. Like, have patience and compassion for people, including yourself. And it all starts with us. It's very hard to have compassion with other people on things that you don't have compassion with yourself on, right? So kindness starts at home. So start with yourself, and find that space and find that compassion, and allow yourself to lean into it and really understand what you're going through, and go through it.
Yeah, it's part of like the cleansing of living a human experience, and you'll be back down there again at some point in the future. You know, we just up and down, and we don't know really when it's coming, or you know how long the high is, or how long the low is. But we can certainly do things to give ourselves a better chance. And I think one distinction that's really important, because I can feel an earlier version of myself kind of resisting a conversation like this, where it's like, oh, you know, just feel into the sadness. And you know, this was something that I really had to work on. Um, and there's a distinction to be made between feeling into the sadness, feeling into the anger, feeling into the frustration. You know, like I bring up this Wednesday just because it was very real for me and very recent. You know, it's probably like it was probably the most down I felt all in a month. What's critically important for me is to understand that when I feel it, when I sit with it, don't resist it, allow it to come through you. You can go on some tangents about reinforcing, because your brain will go and try to find reasons why it's sad or why it's frustrated, or what have you. But what's super important is to not cross that line into victimhood. And to not allow yourself to play the victim card, or to go down too far down the thought tree of being a victim. And if I can do that, then I know that I'm on the path to eventually coming back up. And it may happen in an hour, it may happen tomorrow, it may happen in a couple of days, but I know that I'm not anchoring myself down into that space. And I feel like it's easier to comprehend when we think about being there for a friend or a loved one. It's this amazing human thing that we love, that we get great payoff to be there for somebody who needs us, who could use a friend, who could use somebody else's strength. And when somebody is really sad, it's funny how we come rushing to help them and sit with them. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's a very loving act, especially when it's, you know, a partner, a romantic partner, you know, and they're not feeling good, and having them be vulnerable and open up and say, I'm not feeling good. You love being there. You love offering the chest. You love offering the arms, the space for them. But we do know that if they start to talk in a way that they're kind of like playing the victim card, that starts to become gross to us. You know, we kind of, that will really make us want to shorten that interaction when they start rehashing victim stories. But if they're honest and authentic and vulnerable and open with their sadness, anger, fear, whatever, it's a beautiful thing to share in. But once we cross over into the victim stories, that's when it begins to be gross with somebody else and also with ourselves.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think if they do move into whatever it is they're feeling, if they do really face it head on, I think they're worried and maybe a bit afraid that they are going to get stuck in it and never come out. But like you said, it's the difference between allowing yourself the space to feel it and approaching it from that perspective of being the victim. They're very different places, you know. And I think that's the difference between compassion and sympathy, is when someone's in that space of feeling the victim and we sympathize with them, we're saying, yes, they shouldn't have done that to you, and you know, you really need to get your vengeance and whatever it is. Whereas compassion says, you know, I'm sorry that you're in this not so great place, but I'm holding the space for you, and I trust that you are going to find your way out of it, because it's really got nothing to do with anybody else. And I think that's where we fall into that trap of getting stuck in it, like you said, is that victimhood. And oh boy, can we have a grand old time with that. I know I've been there many times in the past, and And it wasn't until I dropped the whole, they did this to me, and started looking at it from the perspective of, I am looking at this as an attack on me, and that's not what it is at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm feeling disappointment. Yes, I'm feeling, whatever it is I'm feeling, but I'm feeling it because of the way I choose to see the situation, not because of what someone did to me. And that's the point at which you start to crawl back out of the muck and the mire, and you really see the truth, and you can get back to engaging in life again from that very wonderful and joyful place. So yeah.
That's a great point. And that is something that we need to know and understand. I don't know whether it's a design flaw in our brain. Maybe there's places where it's really useful, or maybe it's just a place that, we're just still in our infancy as an evolution of a species. And it's a trick our mind plays on us. And a lot of times it does a lot of damage to our best laid plans. And it's that, our brain wants to make permanent what is so obviously temporary, or it thinks things are permanent that are so obviously temporary. And our experience will tell us otherwise. But in the moment, in that state, to come completely full circle, our brain thinks that this is always forever.
Yes, I think we think that if we step over that threshold, we're going to be stuck there forever. And it's quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. It's
so true.
It's not that, again, that threshold is the only thing between us and joy and peace. And unless you make that choice to cross it, you're going to be stuck in resistance and suffering.
Yeah.
It's just how it is.
Yeah. That damn threshold.
I know, eh? Killer.
I know that we've gone past half an hour here, and it's good. It was a lively discussion today, and I would love it. I would love it if you could finish us off with a meditation into our day.
I most certainly can. Let's close our eyes and take a deep breath. Breathing deeply right down into your belly, feeling the life force, that life-giving energy and fire moving down through our body into every cell, feeling each part of us, each cell, each little membrane of us starting to tingle and warm up with that beautiful life-giving force. And as we breathe into that, standing at the edge of that threshold to whatever it is that you feel that you don't want to look at, whether it's fear, guilt, shame, anger, sadness, depression, anxiety, whatever it is on the other side of that threshold. Stand right there in that moment and take that first step across the threshold. And as you cross that threshold into the fear or shame or guilt or sadness, feel the courage first that it took to take that first step, and then just witness what is left in that place of making that first step. What is left of the fear, the anger, sadness? Is it like a fog that from the other side of the threshold you couldn't see through, and yet as you step across it, it starts to dissipate and disappear, and everything becomes clearer, and there is a peace settling on your heart that you've never known before, because you had the courage to walk into the fire. and to move through it in joy and in peace, with loving gratitude for that courage that allowed you to do so. And when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and your toes and bring yourself back to the world.
That was great, Bettina. I like the idea of, it enveloping your heart with each time you step over the threshold. You get one more example of you're okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us this week. It was a pleasure to put it on, and we'll see you all again next.
Have a great week, everyone.